the Sorcerer Supreme in the grimdark galaxy. What if the master of the mystic arts suddenly found himself ripped from his reality and thrown into the terrifying far-future world of Warhammer 40,000? The Sorcerer Supreme, Dr. Stephen Strange, awoke on the surface of a dead alien vessel made of solidified psychic bone. His profound mystic senses were immediately overwhelmed by the piercing, agonizing shriek of the dimension known here as the warp. In this new reality, the fundamental laws governing existence were alien, and his own powerful magic drew the ravenous attention of ancient, malevolent entities. The eye of Agamotto pulsed with frantic warnings as shadowy forces converged from across the star-strewn void. Fanatical imperial hunters, cunning alien prophets, and corrupted servants of the cosmic force that thrives on manipulation and ambition. In a universe where optimism is often the deadliest mistake, could even the great doctor resist the deep-seated corruption that seemed to taint all forms of psychic and arcane power? The empty space above the massive, long-dead space vessel was utterly silent until it was violently torn open. Reality split like fragile parchment, its edges burning with impossible, maddening colors, and through the tear tumbled a human figure. Dr. Stephen Strange fell through the spatial rift, his cloak of levitation billowing out as he slammed onto the pearlescent surface of the structure. The sudden, violent impact stole his breath, and a sharp pain shot through his already damaged hands. He lay there, fighting for air. This was catastrophic. The dimensional transfer spell should have been a smooth, calculated passage, not a brutal expulsion into this place. Strange forced himself upright, his cloak supporting him as he took in his surroundings. The ground beneath him was a smooth, lustrous material unlike anything he had ever encountered, humming faintly with latent energy. Elegant towers and arches rose around him, their former grace now marred by deep scorch marks and structural decay. The atmosphere was stale, endlessly recycled. His mystic senses registered no trace of life. Yet, he felt observed. Something immense, predatory, and infinitely hungry watched him from beyond the fragile curtain of reality. Strange felt its focus like a crushing weight on his very soul. The dimensional barriers here were frighteningly thin, barely holding back a tide of screaming madness. To regain his composure, Strange raised his hands, his scarred fingers meticulously tracing familiar magical patterns. Golden circular shields, known as mandalas, flickered into existence, but they immediately warped, their perfect geometry twisting unnaturally. The mystical energy he commanded seemed to act like a beacon, drawing that distant, malevolent attention closer, like a drop of blood spreading in water. "Eye of Agamotto," he whispered to the amulet on his chest. "Show me this realm." The artifact flared with brilliant emerald light, and a torrent of visions assaulted him. A galaxy consumed by war, a living corpse sitting on a golden throne, and titanic armies clashing across the stars. He saw beings of such pure evil that even his most terrifying enemy, Dormammu, might hesitate to face them. And everywhere, a perpetual storm of souls and intense emotions, constantly feeding four unfathomably massive, conscious entities. Strange violently severed the connection, stumbling backward. Though the eye dimmed, the terrible knowledge remained. This was not his universe, nor any parallel he knew. It was a place fundamentally different, where the basic laws of reality were alien, and where his own magic was dangerously intertwined with the horrifying dimension he had just glimpsed. The warp. A distant rumble drew his attention. Through a transparent dome above, Strange saw a starship approaching the dead structure. Its design was unmistakably human, but grotesquely altered by dark technology. Black, angular, and bristling with heavy weaponry. Strange sensed the minds aboard. Human, but many were enhanced, augmented, and they had clearly detected his abrupt arrival. He quickly recentered his power, steadying himself despite the chaotic fluctuations of ambient energy. The cloak of levitation tightened its grip on his shoulders, carrying him deeper into the colossal, abandoned structure. He needed to understand this place before facing its inhabitants. The haunted halls and the first confrontation. The inner corridors of the ancient alien vessel were organically grown, flowing and graceful. Strange moved past empty, dust-filled chambers containing crystalline artifacts. Touching one briefly, he received a painful flicker of stored memory. Tall, elegant beings moving through these same halls, their thoughts ancient and permeated with sorrow. The Eldari, Strange murmured, the alien knowledge filtering into his consciousness from the residual psychic imprint. This had been their home, their world ship. A piercing wail suddenly cut through the silence, warning systems activating after countless cycles of dormancy. The humans had breached the hull. Strange moved with renewed urgency, following his instincts toward the structure's probable center. If a fight was inevitable, he preferred to choose the terrain. He entered a vast chamber, its high ceiling lost in shadow. At its heart stood a complex device, a sort of technological throne surrounded by crystalline mechanisms. The throne called to him with a silent, urgent, psychic pull. Strange approached cautiously, instinctively recognizing its purpose. A nexus, a potential gateway, perhaps his only means of returning home. The massive doors to the chamber exploded inward in a shower of wraithbone shrapnel. Armored figures, crude but powerfully built, stormed in, their weapons raised. They were clad in ornate black armor, adorned with human skulls and wax purity seals, with crimson robes flowing beneath the plates. In the name of the holy ordos of the Emperor's Inquisition, you will surrender, their leader shouted. She was a woman whose face was half stern human flesh, half gleaming cybernetic metal. Strange could feel the white-hot, self-righteous conviction radiating from her mind. Strange slowly raised his hands. I intend no harm. I am a visitor to your reality, brought here by accident. The woman let out a humorless laugh. The warp claims no one by accident, sorcerer. Your foul powers have been tracked across 3 star systems. The stench of that dark dimension surrounds you. You reek of heresy. I assure you, I serve no chaos, Strange countered, his mind swiftly processing the data from the eye of Agamotto. These humans feared the psychic dimension and linked its power exclusively with corruption. Given what he'd sensed lurking there, they weren't entirely wrong. Lies, she spat. Restrain him. 2 soldiers advanced, carrying odd devices that hummed with unfamiliar energy. They projected a field that immediately dulled Strange's mystic senses, making his ears feel like they were stuffed with cotton. Null fields of some kind. Strange acted instantly. His hands swept outward, manifesting the winds of Watum as powerful golden streams of energy, knocking the advancing soldiers backward. But the spell sputtered and twisted at the edges. The strange, ambient energy of this dimension actively fought against its structure. The Inquisitor raised her weapon, a pistol crackling with blue plasma. "Sorcery! The sentence is death." But the shot never came. A new sound interrupted them, a wet, tearing noise from behind the Imperial troops. Screams erupted as something moved among the armored humans with impossible speed. Strange watched in horror as the rear guard was brutally shredded. Blood spattered the walls as shadowy figures danced through their ranks. Where they touched, armor split and flesh was separated from bone. The attackers were slender, elegant shapes moving like liquid darkness, wielding wickedly curved blades that shimmered with deadly energy. The Inquisitor whirled, firing repeatedly into the new threat. "Drukhari!" she screamed in rage. "Defend yourselves!" Strange recognized the connection to the world ship's former inhabitants, but these newcomers radiated a palpable, sadistic cruelty and predatory glee. They fought with blinding speed and precision. Caught between two hostile forces, Strange made a quick decision. He levitated upward, the cloak carrying him above the sudden melee, as he gathered his power. The 7 rings of Ragador encircled his fists. He aimed to incapacitate, not kill. Golden bands of energy shot out, attempting to bind fighters from both sides. But something interfered again. The magical bindings warped on contact with the alien raiders. Their strange weapons seemed to actively drink the mystical energy, hungrily devouring it. One of the Dark Warriors looked up at Strange, their face hidden behind a gruesome mask. "A new plaything!" it hissed, the voice laced with malicious delight. "Your soul shines brightly, Mon-Ki sorcerer." A chill ran through Strange. These creatures fed on suffering. Their very presence resonated with the darkest, most depraved aspects of the warp he had glimpsed. The battle below intensified. The Inquisition forces fought with desperate, furious zeal, but they were hopelessly outmatched by the raiders' sheer speed and savage skill. Strange saw the Inquisitor herself locked in a duel with the apparent alien leader, her powerful sword clashing against a pair of curved blades. Strange focused, quickly adapting his spellcraft to this realm's unique energies. He traced complex, abstract patterns in the air, feeling the inherent resistance of this universe's natural laws. The mirror dimension might not exist here, but he could create something analogous. Reality itself fractured around the combatants as Strange imposed his will upon it. The chamber seemed to fold inward, reflective surfaces multiplying and disorienting both human and alien fighters. In this tightly controlled space, Strange could finally direct his powers with more efficacy. The Drukhari hissed in anger and confusion, their attacks striking only mirror images that shattered into harmless golden sparks. The Imperial troops huddled together, equally disoriented but grateful for the chance to regroup. Strange descended to the floor, his hands constantly weaving to maintain the dimensional fold. He approached the Inquisitor, who immediately trained her weapon on him despite her bleeding injuries. "I can get your people out of here," Strange said, urgently. "But you must trust me." "Trust a sorcerer?" Blood trickled from her cybernetic facial interface. "I would sooner trust a demon." "Then trust survival," Strange countered. "Those creatures want to take you alive for purposes I suspect you understand better than I do." A flicker of genuine fear crossed her human eye. She clearly knew the terrifying reputation of these raiders. "What do you propose?" "A temporary truce," Strange said. "I will hold them back while you withdraw to your ship. In return, you allow me time to study this structure before you destroy it." What makes you think destruction is our intent? Experience, Strange said simply. A furious shriek announced that the Drukhari were rapidly adapting to his dimensional trickery. Reflective surfaces cracked as wickedly barbed hooks struck them from multiple angles. Decide quickly, Strange urged. The Inquisitor's face hardened with grim resolve. Sergeant Kovac, get the wounded to the rendezvous point. I will cover our retreat with this temporary asset. The surviving soldiers began their withdrawal. The Inquisitor, however, remained, her power sword humming with energy. I am Inquisitor Vale of the Ordo Hereticus, she stated. Betray us, and the Imperium's wrath will follow you across the stars. Dr. Stephen Strange, he replied, and I have no intention of making any more enemies today. The mirror dimension construct shattered completely as the Drukhari launched a coordinated assault. Their leader landed directly before Strange and Vale, his twin blades dripping with the blood of the fallen Imperial troops. Such delicious fear, the leader purred, removing his helmet to reveal a gaunt, pale face of disturbing alien beauty. The human psyker reeks of displacement. His soul is untouched by she who thirsts, a rare delicacy. Strange raised his hands, mystic shields forming instantly. I don't know who she who thirsts is, but no one will be feasting on souls today. The Drukhari laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Your ignorance is remarkable. You stand before Archon Vidrax of the Flayed Nerve Cabal. Your suffering will be legendary. Strange glanced at Vale. Get your people clear. I'll handle this. To his surprise, she gave a curt nod and began backing toward the exit, firing calculated covering shots as she retreated. Alone, Strange now faced the Drukhari raiders. A dozen of them, armed with weapons designed purely to inflict maximum agony. Their minds radiated a hunger that transcended mere physical need, a spiritual void that could never be filled. Impressive toys, Strange remarked, gesturing at their exotic weaponry. But you're not the first extra-dimensional predators I've encountered. He struck first, abandoning his defensive posture for the aggressive bolts of Balthak. Crimson energy lanced from his fingertips, striking 3 raiders simultaneously. They convulsed as their nervous systems overloaded with the sheer mystical current. The Archon moved with breathtaking speed, closing the distance to Strange before the bodies of his subordinates hit the floor. His blades whirled in complex, terrifying patterns, each strike aimed at nerve clusters rather than vital organs. Strange's cloak yanked him backward, narrowly avoiding disembowelment. He countered with the bands of Sitarak, crimson bindings wrapping around the Archon's limbs. But the Dark Warrior's armor seemed to absorb the spell's energy, the bindings dissolving into mist. Your power tastes of distant realms, Vidrax hissed. The homunculi will enjoy dissecting its secrets from your brain. The remaining Drukhari circled, cutting off any path of escape. Strange realized he needed to adapt further to this reality's rules. These beings had evolved in a universe where psychic energy was a fundamental force. His Earth-based mysticism needed a local translation. Strange focused on the ambient energy of the alien structure itself. The wraithbone material hummed with vast, dormant psychic potential. Now accessible, he reached out with his consciousness, connecting to it as he would tap into a powerful ley line back home. A different kind of power surged through him, raw but usable. Strange channeled it through the familiar forms of the Vishanti spells, but allowed the energy to shape itself according to the structure's nature. Runes appeared in the air around him, glowing with an intense blue-white light. The Drukhari faltered, recognizing the symbols of their ancient, noble kin. Strange didn't understand their meaning, but he felt their purpose: warding, protection, banishment. "Impossible," Vidrak snarled. "No Mon-Ki can wield the old runes." Strange brought his hands together, completing the spell. The runes expanded outward in a devastating wave of force, striking the Drukhari. Where the energy touched, the raiders' very shadows seemed to be torn away from their bodies by the world ship's awakened defenses. The Archon alone withstood the full force of the assault, though even he staggered backward, his armor smoking where the runes had struck. His face was contorted with rage and something else: fear. "This is not over, sorcerer," he spat, activating a device on his wrist. A shimmering dark portal opened behind him. "Your soul is marked now. We will meet again when you have exhausted yourself against the Imperium's dogs." Vidrax and his surviving warriors retreated through the portal, which collapsed behind them in a shower of dark light. Strange released his hold on the structure's energy, feeling the draining effort of channeling such alien power. His hands trembled more violently than usual, his old injuries protesting the strain. The chamber fell silent, scattered with the bodies of the fallen Imperial troops and dark, viscous stains where the Drukhari had stood. The architect of Fate's disciple Strange turned toward the central throne, his objective before the interruption. A slow, mocking clap echoed through the chamber. "Most impressive, Doctor," a cultured voice remarked. "You adapt quickly." At the entrance stood a tall figure in ornate power armor of midnight blue, adorned with arcane symbols, eyes, and stylized bird motifs. He carried no visible weapon, yet he radiated a power that made Strange's mystic senses flare with instant, severe warning. "Another interested party?" Strange asked wearily. "This is becoming quite the popular destination." The figure advanced with measured steps. His armor hummed with contained power, a potent, psychic resonance emanating from inscribed wards. "Forgive the intrusion. I am Azek Ahriman, once the chief librarian of the Thousand Suns Legion." Something in the man's tone raised Strange's hackles. There was a dangerous knowledge in those eyes that went far beyond mortal learning, and a subtle but unmistakable corruption swimming beneath the surface of his disciplined thought. "You're not with the Inquisition," Strange observed. "Indeed not." Ahriman gestured, and the bodies on the floor instantly burst into blue, silent flame, consuming them utterly. "My interests are rather at odds with Imperial doctrine." Strange maintained his distance, his hands ready to weave a defense. "And what interests bring you to this dead world ship?" "Initially, an unusual psychic disturbance. Your arrival tore quite a hole in the fabric of the immaterium," Ahriman admitted, studying him with unnerving intensity. "But now, you yourself are far more intriguing. You wield power like a psyker, yet your techniques are structured differently. Your soul bears no imperial mark, yet you channel energies that are local to this dimension." "I'm not from your reality," Strange said cautiously. "Where I come from, we call it magic, not psychic power." "Semantics." Ahriman waved a dismissive hand. "Power is power, regardless of the names mortals give it. And you, Dr. Strange, possess power that might serve a far greater purpose." "I'm not interested in serving anyone's purpose but my own," Strange replied, "which is primarily to understand where I am and how to return home." Ahriman laughed softly. "Noble sentiment, but in this universe all power serves something, whether willingly or not. He pointed to the throne. You sought the infinity circuit. You hoped it might provide answers or a way back to your reality. Strange's silence was confirmation enough. It cannot help you. This world ship died too long ago. Its spirit stones are empty, its pathways closed. He extended an armored hand. I, however, possess knowledge that spans millennia. The libraries of Prospero, the forbidden archives of Terra, the very Black Library. I have glimpsed secrets that would allow a man of your talents to traverse realities at will. The offer was tempting, this being clearly held immense knowledge, but the unmistakable corruption that swirled within him was a severe warning, reminiscent of dark sorcerers who dealt with beings like Shumagorath. Knowledge with strings attached is rarely worth the cost, Strange said. I'll find my own way. Ahriman's posture stiffened. You speak as one who has not yet comprehended the true nature of this reality, Doctor. Here the warp touches all. It is not a matter of if you will be claimed, but by whom. His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. And Tzeentch has already taken notice of you. The name? One of the 4 cosmic entities Strange had glimpsed through the eye, sent a profound chill through him. A consciousness of unimaginable scale, feeding on hope, ambition, and the very act of change. I've dealt with dimensional entities before, Strange said firmly. I am not without defenses. So I witnessed, Ahriman acknowledged. Your adaptation of Eldari rune magic was unprecedented, but it merely confirms my suspicion that you would be a valuable ally. He paused. Or a dangerous rival. The implicit threat hung heavy in the air. Strange felt the gathering of immense energy around Ahriman, raw warp power coalescing around his armored form. I don't want a conflict, Strange said, but I won't be coerced either. Then enlightenment through adversity, it shall be. Ahriman raised his hand, and reality seemed to warp around him. Show me the limits of your dimensional magic, Doctor. The attack was not a bolt of energy, but a conceptual change. The air between them instantly transformed, molecules rearranging into toxic, noxious compounds. Simultaneously, the wraithbone floor beneath Strange's feet transmuted into churning liquid quicksilver, attempting to engulf his boots. Strange reacted instinctively, the cloak lifting him above the spreading metal as he conjured the shield of the seraphim against the poisonous atmosphere. Golden light pushed back against the corruption, creating a bubble of protected space. Impressive reflexes, Ahriman commented, but merely defensive. Strange had no intention of remaining defensive. He had seen enough to understand that this reality's powerful psychic abilities operated on principles similar to certain forms of magic. Matter manipulation, energy projection, dimensional interference. The difference was one of source and technique, not fundamental possibility. He gathered his power, drawing on his own reserves and the ambient energy of the world ship. The crimson bands of Sidorak manifested, but Strange modified the spell, incorporating elements of the universe's symbolic language he had glimpsed in Ahriman's armor runes. The bands shot forth, glowing with this new, hybridized energy. Where they struck Ahriman's protective aura, they did not dissolve. Instead, they adhered, tightening around the corrupted sorcerer's armor with increasing, crushing pressure. Ahriman's eyes widened behind his helm. You learn quickly, he acknowledged, his voice strained. But adaptation alone is insufficient. Blue fire erupted from Ahriman's form, burning through the binding bands. He raised his arms, and the very chamber around them began to change. Walls melted, the floor twisted. Reality itself became malleable as Ahriman imposed his will upon it. Strange recognized the technique. It was similar to his own manipulation of the mirror dimension. But Ahriman was not creating a separate pocket. He was directly altering the material realm, a dangerous act that threatened the fabric of space-time itself. "Stop," Strange warned. "This level of reality manipulation is unstable. You risk collapsing the dimensional boundaries." "Precisely," Ahriman replied. "The thinning of the veil will allow greater communion with the changer of ways. You will witness perfection." The air shimmered as impossible entities began to materialize around them. Avian shapes with too many eyes, humanoid figures with contorted proportions. Demons, Strange realized, physical manifestations of the warp's consciousness brought forth by Ahriman's work. This had gone far enough. Strange centered himself, focusing on the core principles of his mystical training. The multiverse operated on consistent laws, regardless of local variations. If the walls between dimensions were thinning, he could exploit that weakness. "By the Vishanti and the 7 sons of Cinnabis," Strange intoned, weaving complex fluid patterns with his fingers, "I invoke the crimson dimension of Sitarak, the purple dimension of Agamotto, the azure dimension of Balthak." Power surged through Strange as he connected to these external realms. They existed outside the primary influence of this universe's warp, untainted by its corruption. Through these connections, Strange could access power that Ahriman and his demonic master could not easily counter. The chamber filled with light of clashing, impossible colors as multiple dimensional energies converged. The materializing demons shrieked as their forms destabilized, caught between the warp and Strange's invoked dimensions. Ahriman staggered backward, his armor cracking under the pressure of the conflicting forces. "Impossible!" he gasped. "Your power draws from outside the great ocean." "How?" Strange did not answer, focusing entirely on maintaining the confluence, while directing its energy to banish the demons and stabilize the local reality. Golden mandalas expanded outward from his hands, reinforcing the natural laws of this universe against Ahriman's corrupting influence. The sorcerer in blue armor raised his staff in desperation, attempting to counter Strange's working with raw warp power. For a fleeting moment, the energies balanced precariously. Then, Strange played his final card. He activated the Eye of Agamotto, its green light cutting through the chaotic energies like a beacon of perfect order. Time itself slowed around Ahriman, his movements becoming sluggish as Strange accelerated his own perception. In the relative eternity of that moment, Strange completed a complex banishment ritual, targeting not Ahriman, but his connection to the warp. The spell struck true, temporarily severing the sorcerer from his power source. Ahriman roared in frustration as his demonic manifestations dissolved into smoke. The reality distortions he had created snapped back into normal space. The chamber returned to its original decaying state. He fell to one knee, psychic energy bleeding from his armor like steam. "What manner of being are you?" he demanded, his voice strained. "No psyker can command such power without the warp. No mortal can channel such energies without corruption." Strange descended to the floor, the cloak settling around his shoulders. The dimensional energies he had invoked receded. "As I told you, I'm not from your reality," Strange said. "Where I come from, order and chaos exist in a kind of balance. Magic flows from many sources, not just a single, corrupting dimension. I've spent decades learning to master these forces without surrendering to them. Ahriman studied him with new, grudging respect. Then you are either the most dangerous being to enter this galaxy, or its potential savior. He rose unsteadily. Tzeentch will not release his claim on you easily now that he has witnessed your potential, and the Imperium will hunt you as a witch of unprecedented threat. I don't intend to stay long enough for either to be a concern, Strange replied. This reality is fundamentally unstable. I need to find a way back to my dimension before that corruption reaches me as well. Ahriman laughed bitterly. You understand more than most who have dwelled here for centuries. He straightened, his armor sealing itself through some internal mechanism. We shall meet again, Dr. Strange. When you have seen more of this universe, you may find my offer more appealing. The path of the Thousand Suns offers mastery, not surrender. Before Strange could respond, Ahriman vanished in a flash of blue flame, teleporting away through warp space. Prophecy and the ultimate threat. The sudden absence of Ahriman's corrupting presence made the chamber feel cleaner, though emptier. Strange turned his attention back to the Infinity Circuit throne. Though Ahriman had claimed it was dead, Strange sensed residual energy within it. Not enough for his initial purpose, but perhaps sufficient to provide further answers. He approached the throne, placing his scarred hands on the armrests, closing his eyes as he opened his mind to the world ship's residual psychic memories. Visions flooded his consciousness. The world ship in its prime, filled with the tall, graceful Eldari. Their civilization at its height, masters of technology and seamless psychic arts. Then horror, the collapse of their empire under the weight of its own terrible excesses. The monstrous birth of a new chaos god, she who thirsts, from their collective depravity. He saw their desperate flight into the void, preserving what remained of their culture aboard these giant world ships. And finally, the end of this particular vessel, a fleet of brutal human ships, boarding actions, and desperate last stands, as fanatical zealots purged the alien presence from these very corridors. The Infinity Circuit was meant to preserve the souls of the dead, but with no living to maintain it. Those souls had gradually faded into the warp, despite the powerful protections. Strange withdrew from the visions, his mind reeling from the scale of the tragedy. An entire civilization destroyed by the very dimensional forces he had felt pressing against reality. And in their fall, they had strengthened those forces, creating a terrifying feedback loop of destruction. He stood up from the throne, his next move suddenly clear. This world ship was a temporary dead end. The Imperium would return, as would the Drukhari, and possibly Ahriman or others like him. Strange needed more profound information about this reality and a secure location to work on a solution. The cloak of levitation settled around his shoulders, echoing his resolve. Strange withdrew his sling ring. It had failed to open a portal home earlier. The dimensional coordinates were meaningless here. But perhaps, with the knowledge he'd gained from the world ship's memory, he could transport himself to a specific location within this galaxy. Strange focused on the images he had gleaned. Another Eldari location, one that still lived. A place called Ulthway, a world ship renowned for its powerful seers and prophetic abilities. If anyone could help him understand the warp enough to safely navigate his way home, it would be them. The sling ring sparked as Strange rotated his hand, creating a portal. The circular gateway opened sluggishly, the local energies resisting his will more than ever before. Through it, he glimpsed a location radically different from the dead halls around him. Living wraithbone, pulsing with psychic light, and robed figures turning in surprise at the unexpected dimensional breach. Strange stepped through, the cloak billowing behind him as the portal instantly snapped shut, leaving the empty structure to its silence once more. The Seers of Ulthway. The Seers of Ulthway reacted with astonishing speed. Before his portal had fully closed, Strange found himself surrounded by alien warriors in black and bone-colored armor, their weapons immediately aimed at him. Behind them stood the Seers themselves, tall Eldari in elaborate robes, adorned with glowing psychic runes. "Hold!" commanded one of the Seers, his voice resonating with deep authority. This one comes unexpectedly, yet his arrival was glimpsed in the skein of fate. The warriors remained poised, but they did not attack. Strange stood motionless, his hands visible, projecting non-hostile intent. "I apologize for the intrusion," Strange said. "I am Dr. Stephen Strange, master of the mystic arts, and I find myself stranded in your reality." The lead seer approached, moving with impossible grace despite his apparent age. His eyes were milky white, yet Strange sensed he perceived far more than mere physical sight allowed. "I am Farseer Eldrad," the Eldari said. "Your presence ripples through the webway and disturbs the patterns we have long observed. You are not of this universe, yet you wield its energies with curious proficiency." Strange bowed his head respectfully. "I am a quick study, when necessity demands it, but my understanding remains limited. I seek knowledge to help me return to my own dimension before the corruption of the warp takes hold of me." Eldrad gestured, and the warriors stepped back, though they remained vigilant. "Come. The Dome of Crystal Seers is a more appropriate place for this discussion." Strange followed the Farseer through corridors that were far more vibrant than the dead ship he had just left. The living wraithbone pulsed with psychic energy, responding to the emotions and thoughts of the Eldari who passed through. Civilians watched him with unconcealed suspicion, many retreating into adjacent chambers at his approach. "Your kind fears humans," Strange observed. "With good reason," Eldrad replied. "The Mon-Ki Imperium would gladly see all Eldari exterminated. Our darker kin have done little to improve your species' reputation, and individual humans with psychic gifts typically bring catastrophe in their wake." "I am aware of the dangers," Strange said. "I've already encountered entities from your warp. A sorcerer named Ahriman attempted to recruit me to his cause." Eldrad stopped abruptly, turning to face Strange with new intensity. "You encountered the arch-sorcerer of the Thousand Suns and lived to speak of it? Few can claim such a distinction." "We reached an impasse," Strange said simply. "His power is considerable, but it draws from sources I find problematic." The Farseer studied him for a long moment before continuing their journey. "Perhaps you are not entirely foolish for a human." They entered a vast dome where crystalline statues stood in concentric circles. Each statue, Strange realized, had once been a living Eldari seer, their bodies transformed in death to preserve their psychic essence. The air hummed with contained power, the accumulated wisdom of generations. At the center of the dome stood a raised platform with a pool of what appeared to be liquid crystal. Other seers waited there, their expressions grave, as Strange approached. "The human anomaly," said one, a female Eldari, whose robes bore more elaborate runes than the others. "His coming represents a bifurcation point in the sky." "Indeed, Farseer Masha," Eldrad agreed. "The paths of fate grow clouded around his presence. Some lead to utter devastation, others to an unexpected salvation." Strange looked between them. "You foresaw my arrival?" "Not specifically," Matcha replied. "But disturbances in the great ocean have been growing for cycles. The changer of ways stirs with unusual purpose. Now we understand why." Strange approached the crystal pool. "You mean the entity called Tzeentch has anticipated my crossing between realities?" The Farseers exchanged tense glances. "You speak the name with dangerous casualness, human," Eldrad warned. "But yes, the Architect of Fate perceives much that others cannot. If your arrival creates a possibility for significant change, it would naturally draw his attention." "I have no intention of becoming a pawn in some cosmic game," Strange said firmly. "I only need to understand this reality's dimensional structure enough to find my way home." Matcha gestured to the pool. "Then gaze into the pools of becoming if you dare. They show the truth to those strong enough to withstand it." Strange hesitated only briefly before kneeling at the edge of the pool. The liquid crystal swirled with colors and patterns that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. He brought his face closer to the surface. Reflections formed and dissolved. Strange saw himself as he had been, performing the fateful spell that had ripped him from his reality. He saw the accident for what it truly was, no accident at all, but a deliberate interference from this side of the dimensional barrier. Tendrils of warp energy had reached across the void, latching onto his spell and violently pulling him through. The vision shifted, showing potential paths branching outward from his arrival. In one, he allied with the Imperium, using his power to reinforce the barriers against the warp. In another, he joined with Ahriman, seeking forbidden knowledge that ultimately consumed him. In a third, he was captured by the Drukhari, his suffering feeding their immortality for centuries. And in one, the most disturbing of all, he ascended to become a new, horrifying power in the warp itself, a being of unique chaos that permanently altered the balance of this universe. Strange pulled back from the pool, his mind reeling from the possibilities. The Farseers watched him intently, gauging his reaction. "You understand now," Eldrad said. "Your presence here is no mere chance. You have been drawn into a game whose scope exceeds even your considerable understanding." "I refuse to be manipulated," Strange said, his voice steady despite the disturbing visions. "In my reality, I have faced dimensional entities of similar malevolence. They can be resisted. They can be defeated." Matcha laughed, a sound like crystal chimes. "Your confidence would be amusing if it were not so dangerous. The Chaos Gods are not mere entities, human. They are the warp itself, given consciousness by the emotions of all sentient beings over millennia. They cannot be truly defeated while life exists." Strange absorbed this, reconciling it with what he had learned. Then containment is the only option, a separation between dimensions. "The Eldari Empire once maintained such a separation," Eldrad said grimly. "Our technology and psychic mastery kept the veil strong, but we grew decadent, and in our excesses, we tore that veil asunder. The results," he gestured around them, "are evident. A reduced people fleeing through space on world ships. While your fallen kin raid and torture for immortality," Strange finished. "You grasped the scope of our tragedy quickly," Matcha acknowledged. But what will you do with this understanding? The paths shown in the pool remain fluid. Your choices will solidify them. The breach and the price of order. Before Strange could answer, alarms blared throughout the world ship. The crystal dome shuddered as distant explosions registered through the massive wraithbone structure. "We are under attack," Eldrad announced, though Strange suspected the Farseer had anticipated this. "The servants of the Corpse Emperor have followed your dimensional wake, human." Strange moved toward the dome's entrance. "Then I will help defend against them. I owe you that much for the knowledge you've shared." Eldrad raised a hand. "No, the Imperium is not the true threat." His milky eyes seemed to look beyond the physical realm. "The breach in real space that brought you here never fully closed. It widens now, allowing that which hungers to reach through." The wraithbone walls around them began to warp and twist. Psychic energy crackled across the surfaces as reality itself strained under an immense external pressure. Strange felt it immediately. The same predatory consciousness he had sensed upon his arrival, but magnified 1,000-fold. "The changer of ways reaches forth," Macha whispered, fear finally evident in her voice. "He has found the path to your reality, human sorcerer." Strange understood with sudden, horrifying clarity. His transit had created a weakened point between dimensions. While he had been seeking knowledge, the entity called Sinch had been widening the tear, preparing to extend its corrupting influence into Strange's home dimension, a universe utterly unprepared for the touch of chaos. "I won't allow that," Strange said, his resolve hardening. The cloak of levitation billowed around him as he gathered his power. "Show me to the breach." The Farseers led him swiftly through corridors now filled with mobilizing Eldari warriors and panicking civilians. They emerged onto an observation platform that offered a view of the void beyond the world ship's protective dome. The void itself was visibly tearing open. A colossal rift stretched across the starscape, its edges writhing with impossible colors and mind-breaking shapes. Imperial ships hung in space nearby, caught in the gravity of the anomaly, their massive hulls beginning to buckle under the impossible forces. The Imperial fools sought to investigate the dimensional disturbance, Eldrad explained. They have instead provided the catalyst for its expansion. Their deaths feed the warp's hunger. Strange assessed the situation. The breach was similar to ones he had faced before, but its scale was unprecedented. And what lay beyond was not merely another dimension, but a realm of pure, malevolent, psychic energy. "I need to get closer," Strange decided. "Can your vessels take me there?" "It would be suicide," Macha objected. "Even our ships cannot approach such a breach safely." "I don't need safety," Strange countered. "I need proximity." After a brief, intense consultation, the Farseers agreed. Strange was escorted to a sleek Eldari vessel that hummed with advanced psychic technology. Its pilot, a grim warrior veteran, eyed Strange with undisguised suspicion. "The Monkey wishes to die at the threshold of the warp," the pilot said dispassionately. "I will oblige." The ship detached from the world ship, its wraithbone hull glowing with protective runes as it accelerated toward the growing rift. Through the crystalline viewport, Strange watched as they approached the howling tear in space-time. The Imperial ships grew larger in their view, massive, cathedral-like vessels clearly in deep distress. "The humans fire upon us," the pilot announced, as energy beams lanced out from the Imperial ships. Wraithbone shields flared, absorbing the attacks. Their fear makes them predictable. "Can you get me within 100 meters of the breach?" Strange asked, ignoring the incoming fire. "I can reach 50 before the ship begins to lose structural integrity," the pilot replied with grim professional pride. "Whether you survive at that distance is another matter." The Eldari vessel danced through the Imperial barrage with impossible, breathtaking grace. As they approached the rift, reality itself began to distort. The ship's structure keen in protest, resonating with the psychic energies pouring from the tear. Through the viewport, Strange could now see what lay beyond the breach, a sight that chilled him to his core. A landscape of impossible geometry stretched into infinity. Crystal spires floated amidst rivers of pure thought. And dominating it all, a presence so vast that Strange could perceive only fragments of its totality, shifting between forms with dizzying speed. Tzeentch, the changer of ways. The god of ambition turned malevolent, now fully aware of Strange's universe, a fresh realm to corrupt. "Close enough," Strange announced. "Hold this position as long as you can. The vessel's psychic shielding will fail in approximately 3 minutes," the pilot warned. "After that, our souls belong to she who thirsts." Strange didn't waste time. He moved to the airlock chamber, the cloak wrapping tightly around him. The Eldari pilot watched with what might have been respect as Strange sealed the inner door. "Your courage honors your primitive species, sorcerer," came the pilot's voice over the comms. "May your soul find peace in whatever afterlife awaits you." Strange activated the outer door. The vacuum of space instantly embraced him, but the cloak protected him, maintaining a thin envelope of atmosphere. He floated free of the ship, propelled toward the breach by the cloak's own power. As he neared the tear, the pull of the warp intensified. Tzeentch's corrupting influence reached for his mind, probing for weakness and ambition to exploit. Strange reinforced his mental shields, drawing on decades of mystical discipline. He halted 50 meters from the breach, suspended in the void. From here, he could see the full extent of the damage. The tear was growing exponentially, feeding on the energy of the dying Imperial ships caught in its event horizon. Soon, it would be large enough for the demonic entities to pour through. Not just into this reality, but into Strange's home dimension as well. Strange gathered his power. The eye of Agamotto glowed at his throat, its power connecting to the time stream of this reality. He began to weave a complex sealing spell, adapting the techniques he had used to repair dimensional breaches in the past. Golden energy flowed from his hands, forming intricate patterns around the edges of the tear. But the breach fought back, its chaotic energies struggling against the imposed order of Strange's magic. From within the warp, a titanic force pushed against him. Strange felt Tzeentch's direct attention, a consciousness so alien it threatened to shatter his sanity. "You seek to deny me a new realm, mortal sorcerer," came a voice that existed directly in Strange's mind. "Yet you could rule there as my herald. Your ambition for knowledge mirrors my own nature. We are kindred." Strange ignored the voice, concentrating on his spell. The golden energy began to contract, forcing the edges of the breach closer. But progress was agonizingly slow, and the strain on Strange's body and mind grew with every second. "Your efforts are futile," Tzeentch continued. "This universe has already fallen to chaos. Yours will follow. It is inevitable. Change is the only constant." Change without purpose or direction is merely entropy, Strange countered, speaking into the void. True mastery comes from guiding change toward harmony. The entity's amusement washed over Strange like a wave of madness. Such limited perspective. I offer you visions of every possible future. Knowledge beyond mortal comprehension. Power to reshape reality according to your will. The cure for your damaged hands. So simple that you marvel at never having discovered it yourself. For a moment, Strange wavered. The temptation was profound, appealing to his deepest desires as a scholar and a healer. But within that knowledge, he instantly sensed the trap. Accepting Tzeentch's gifts meant becoming a corrupted conduit for chaos. I've heard better offers, Strange declared, refocusing on the sealing spell, and from entities with better fashion sense. The amusement vanished, replaced by a cold, crushing rage that manifested as crystalline shards of thought, piercing Strange's mental defenses. Then you will be broken, and your dimension will burn regardless. The attack was powerful enough that Strange's concentration faltered. The golden energy of his spell wavered, allowing the breach to widen further. Through it, Strange glimpsed shapes moving. Tzeentch's demons, entities of pure change and mutation, gathering for the crossing. Strange realized his approach was flawed. He was attempting to seal the breach using only his own power, when he needed to redirect the enormous energies already present. The Imperial ships, the Aeldari vessel, even the breach itself, all contained power that could be harnessed. He altered his strategy, extending his awareness to encompass the entire area. He began a new incantation, the words echoing strangely in the void. By the rings of Ragador and the crimson bands of Sitarak, I transmute chaos to order, entropy to purpose. His hands wove new patterns, no longer attempting to seal the breach directly. Instead, he created a complex dimensional lattice around it, a structure designed to channel and redirect energy. The golden light connected to the Imperial ships, drawing forth the energy of their failing reactors. It reached the Aeldari vessel, synchronizing with its wraithbone resonance. Finally, it extended tendrils into the breach itself, not fighting the warp energies, but guiding them into new, structured configurations. Tzeentch's presence surged against this working, recognizing the profound threat it posed. You cannot control the warp, mortal. It is change incarnate. I don't seek to control it, Strange replied, his voice strained but determined. Merely to direct it. The lattice began to glow brighter as energy flowed through it, following the path Strange defined. The breach's wild, chaotic emissions became structured, cyclical. Instead of expanding outward, the energies began to turn inward, creating a terrifying, self-contained loop. The strain on Strange was immense. His hands trembled violently, his old injury magnified by the effort of maintaining such complex, mystical geometry. Through the failing viewports of the Imperial ships, human crew members watched in awe as the maelstrom of chaotic energy gradually transformed. What had been a ragged, tear-leaking corruption became a perfect circle of swirling power, a controlled whirlpool in the fabric of space-time. This changes nothing, Tzeentch hissed in Strange's mind. You merely delay the inevitable. All barriers fall, all order descends to chaos, eventually. Perhaps, Strange acknowledged, but not today, and not by your hand. With a final, enormous gesture, Strange completed the transformation. The breach collapsed in on itself. Its energies turned back toward the warp in a concentrated beam that pierced deep into that chaotic dimension. Strange glimpsed Tzeentch's domain recoiling from the unexpected counterstrike. The connection between dimensions snapped shut with a concussive wave of force that sent Strange tumbling backward through space. The Imperial ships that had survived were pushed outward by the same wave, their systems temporarily overloaded, but their structures intact. The Eldari vessel danced through the turbulence, eventually stabilizing at a safe distance. Strange floated in the void, utterly exhausted but triumphant. The breach was sealed, the connection to his home dimension severed before Tzeentch could establish a foothold there. The cost, however, was immediately apparent. He had also closed his own path home in the process. The Eldari vessel approached. The airlock opened, and Strange allowed the cloak to carry him inside. As atmosphere flooded the chamber, he collapsed to his knees, his strength finally depleted. The pilot met him as the inner door opened. "You succeeded," the Eldari stated, unconcealed surprise evident in his voice. "The breach is closed." "At a cost," Strange replied wearily. "I've sealed myself in your reality." "Perhaps not permanently," came another voice. Farseer Eldrad stood in the ship's main compartment, his expression unreadable. "Your actions have earned you the gratitude of Ulthwé. That is not a common occurrence for your species." Strange rose unsteadily to his feet. "I didn't do it for gratitude. The breach threatened all realities, including my own." "Nevertheless," Eldrad continued, "what I glimpsed in the skein of fate suggests your path home may yet exist. But it will require time, resources, and knowledge that only the Eldari possess." "Why would you help me?" Strange asked. The Farseer's expression hardened. The architect of fate rarely suffers such direct opposition. His attention will now be fixed upon you, and by extension upon those who harbor you. Our fates are intertwined, whether we wish it or not. As the Eldari vessel returned to the world ship, Strange watched through the viewport as the Imperial ships regrouped. They had withdrawn, but remained present, their weapons undoubtedly trained on the alien craft. "The Mon-Ki will not simply depart," the pilot observed. "They have witnessed power they do not understand, and their response will be predictable. Aggression," Strange concluded, "followed by attempted capture and interrogation." Eldrad nodded. "The Imperium fears what it cannot control. And you, Dr. Strange, represent their greatest fear, power, outside their Emperor's domain." The world ship loomed larger in the viewport, its black surface inlaid with bone-colored runes of protection and foresight. Strange felt a moment of connection with these alien psychics, who, like him, walked the path of mystical knowledge and paid a terrible price for their pursuit of power. "How long will your world ship remain here?" Strange asked. "We depart as soon as all vessels are recovered," Eldrad replied. "The Webway Gate awaits our transition. The Imperium cannot follow where we travel." Strange nodded, already formulating his plans. He would need time to recover, to study this reality's dimensional structure in greater detail. The Eldari possessed knowledge that might help him create a new path home, one that bypassed the dangerous warp entirely. But the path would be long and fraught with dangers he could scarcely imagine. The Imperium, the forces of chaos, the Drukhari raiders who had marked him, all would seek to claim or destroy him. In this grim, dark future, survival alone would be a victory. As the Eldari vessel docked, Strange felt a presence brush against his mind. Not the overwhelming force of Tzeentch, but something subtler, more focused. A consciousness of vast intellect and unfathomable purpose, observing him from across the stars. "The Changer has marked you, but others watch as well," came a voice that bypassed his mental shields effortlessly. "The great game has a new piece on the board. We shall meet when the moment is right." The contact withdrew as suddenly as it had come, leaving Strange with a vision of golden armor and a sense of immeasurable age. Another powerful player in this universe's cosmic drama had taken notice of the dimensional interloper. Strange followed Eldrad from the ship, his expression set with cold determination. This universe had drawn him in against his will, but he would not be its victim or its pawn. He would find his way home, and perhaps in the process, bring something this grim reality desperately needed: hope, change with purpose, the possibility of a better future. The Sorcerer Supreme straightened his shoulders, the cloak of levitation settling around him like a mantle of ultimate authority. The world ship Ulthwé entered the webway, vanishing from real space in a flash of psychic light, carrying its unexpected human ally toward destinies that even the far-seers could not fully predict. In the warp, the crystal labyrinth of Tzeentch reconfigured itself, damaged sections regenerating into new and more complex forms. At its center, the Architect of Fate contemplated the interloper who had dared to defy him. Such resistance was rare and worthy of special attention. New plots unfolded. The game continued with a new player whose moves could not be easily anticipated. Tzeentch, ever the master of the long view, felt something almost like satisfaction. After all, what was chaos without the challenge of true change? Far across the galaxy, on Terra itself, the Emperor stirred in his half-life upon the Golden Throne. His consciousness, fragmented across time and space, momentarily coalesced around a singular awareness. Something fundamental had changed in the tapestry of fate. A golden tear rolled down the withered cheek of the corpse god, unnoticed by the attending tech priests. Whether it was shed in hope or dread, not even the Emperor himself could say. For in the grim darkness of the far future, certainty was the greatest illusion of all.